What is going on, everybody? Today we're going to be flying from San Francisco, California down to Buenos Aires, Argentina by way of Panama City on Central America's secret weapon of an airline. By secret weapon of an airline, I'm referring to Copa Airlines for the sole reason that they're one of the top airlines in Central America, one of the top airlines in South America, and now they're branching out pretty well in North America as well. All at pretty great rates, so it's pretty affordable to fly them. We're going to be trying out the economy cabin on the first flight and the business class cabin on the second flight so we can get the full experience of Copa Airlines. But anyway, we're here at SFO late night. Copa Airlines has one of the last scheduled flights of the day with about a 1 a.m. departure. So if you want to think about it as one of the first flights of the day, you can. But regardless, it's one of the last ones before the airport closes for late night cleaning before it reopens in the morning. Copa Airlines flies out of the A gates in San Francisco's International Terminal. It's actually the only Star Alliance carrier to fly out of the A gates. Most Star Alliance carriers are in the G gates, considering that it's connected to United Airlines, and so it's nice if you book a code share flight. However, Copa, for whatever reason, is over in the A gates. The problem then being, if you are connecting from a code share to Copa Airlines, you will have to leave security because there is no linkage built yet, although it is under construction, so stay tuned for that update. At about 11 o'clock here in San Francisco's International Terminal, the majority of the flights are loading up for trans-Pacific flights to Asia for what we call the midnight push, where all these planes are trying to get out just before midnight to make it the last departure of the day. It makes for a great hub and spoke method, so when those planes reach the destination of wherever they are going in Asia, it makes for an easy connection to a then departure for most people who are connecting on other flights. We are going to be departing out of gate A4 today, but in the meantime, while we wait for our airplane, we're going to go adventure around. Here we see a French BA350, which actually is heading back out to Paris after coming in from Tahiti, and Hawaiian Airlines next to that, which is one of the few domestic carriers that still uses the international terminal. As I mentioned, with the Trans-Pacific Midnight Push, you see a Cathay Pacific A350 boarding for Hong Kong, getting ready to embark on its journey, and right next to that is a China Airlines plane getting ready for the Taipei flight. Continuing with the theme of Trans-Pacific Midnight Push flights, we have one of two flights going to the Philippines, to Manila here at this time of day. There are two 777s that depart pretty close to each other from San Francisco to Manila at this time. Now, if you watch my videos, you know that I love the G gates solely because of the terrace at the end of the wing. Unfortunately, the A gates does not have that terrace, just a big window that overlooks the ramp and the freeway. And on the upper deck, there is still restaurants on both sides, but there is no outdoor terrace like there is in the G gates. Now sped up because they were moving so slow getting into the gate, but here comes our MAX 9 Copa Airlines flight coming in from Panama City. It arrived about 30 minutes late, so we were hoping they'd be able to turn it around quickly. There was a good buffer with about an hour, a little over an hour before our departure, but they tucked it into the back corner here of the A gates, all the way in the far side at gate A3 and A4. And with that, it sounded like they were preparing to start boarding, so I headed downstairs to the boarding area for this flight, basically just to get ready. I was boarding in Group 1 with my Star Alliance Gold Priority. My Star Alliance Gold actually does not get me lounge access here at San Francisco on a Copa Airlines flight. The only one would be over in the G gates for the Polaris Lounge or the United Club, but over in the A gates, there is no lounge for Copa Airlines at SFO. Join me on board as we get on to this 3.5-year-old 737 MAX 9 operated by Copa Airlines and head to our seating, which was actually in the Economy Plus section here in row 8. The Economy Plus section has a little bit more pitch and a little bit more leg room, as well as some other bonuses that I'll show you later. Here is the Economy Plus section. You can see the seatback TVs at every seat, which comes with charging ports as well, and plenty of leg room to sleep for this 7.5-hour flight. And I know I've mentioned it before, but I'm 5'9", so you can use that for your reference. But even with my backpack tucked under the seat, without it being in the overhead locker, you can see there was plenty of leg room and some stuff to read in the flight, although truth be told, pretty much everyone's sleeping considering it's a 1 a.m. departure. Now, when I said that Economy Plus had extra features compared to Economy, there's one big thing you're going to notice here. I'm going to slow the video down so you have time to actually watch this. You will notice There is no seatback TVs in the normal economy section, and there is no universal charging port, just USB charging port. Copa does offer personal device entertainment, so you can use that. However, keep that in mind, if you are in the economy section, you will not have an in-flight entertainment screen. You'll have to use your own device. Another thing that I found kind of weird with Copa Airlines, this was true on both of my flights, but the window placement is just strange. You can see here this row just doesn't even have a window, and some rows that do have windows, it's just not in a very great place, so you'll see that later on in the flight. I use Seat Guru to help me pick a flight. It helps me see what seats are better than others, and people can leave ratings, and if there's a misaligned window, it will usually tell you. But keep that in mind if you are trying to get a window seat with a view on this flight. You don't always have an aligned window. So with that, let's go ahead and take off for Panama. Now that we're in the air, let's take a second to look at the in-flight entertainment screens that you'll find in the Economy Plus and Business Class cabins. It's the same content you'll find on your personal device entertainment that's available to everyone, but predominantly for the Economy Class cabin. But just taking a look, there was a good selection, however it wasn't too extensive, but if you keep in mind that their longest flight is pretty much this one that we're going to be on, 7.5 hours, there is plenty to keep you entertained for that, especially considering half their flights from North America and in their network are red-eyes, so most people are sleeping on board these flights anyway. Now, just before everyone went to sleep, they actually came around with a snack box, which I was super grateful for. I wasn't really expecting a full meal, considering that we were going to be basically flying during all hours of the night when most people aren't eating anyway. But it was a nice treat. It did have things like a sandwich, a granola bar, and enough stuff to keep us occupied for the little meal that we could need. Kept me tied over plenty until we arrived in Panama. Now, we did take a moment to look at the in-flight entertainment available through the Copa Show Pass, which is available to all passengers, but predominantly meant for the people without the seatback TVs. There's plenty of options, same as the seatback TVs, Wi-Fi for purchase, and all that plenty good stuff, which you can see here. In the meantime, though, I'm going to take this as my cue to go get some sleep, and I will see you in Panama. Good morning from somewhere over Costa Rica. The captain just made the announcement that we're about to start our descent into Panama, so we'll be crossing the border soon over Panama. Looks like we're going to be arriving from the northeastern shore of Panama, so come along on the ride and enjoy the views of our arrival into Panama. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Panama City, Panama, the main hub of Copa Airlines, which is what most of these airplanes are that you're going to see here in the video. I just wanted to take a second as we taxi in to talk about how sleeping went on the red-eye flight in my Economy Plus seat. I do think the value of the Economy Plus seat was worth it. I paid about $50 extra for the Economy Plus seat, and the extra legroom was used, and the seat pitch was fantastic. It felt kind of similar to a seat pitch you'd find in a premium economy on some wide body. It's just that the seat wasn't as big to begin with, but it was plenty easy to sleep on. They gave us a normal pillow and blanket that you'd expect in an economy class, but it was plenty to get the job done, and I was able to get a good 4 or 5 hours of sleep without interruption. So that was great, better than expected. Deplaning through glass jet bridges is always a treat, and I always prefer it over the normal jet bridges. Now, they always say that the struggle is keeping it cool because you always have the sun beating down on you, and that was definitely true today. It was hot in this jet bridge. However, we will always fight through the pain just for a little bit more views of our airplane. We arrived into Terminal 2 here at Panama City, Tocumen Airport, as opposed to Terminal 1. Terminal 2 is a little bit newer, and you can see here, it just gives me very similar vibes to that of the Lisbon Airport in Portugal. I've mentioned this on the channel before, but flying a new airline or flying to a new area is always a treat because you see things that you haven't seen before. Looking at this departure board, for example, was super special because I haven't actually flown south of the United States before this trip, and so a lot of these cities that existed in South America or Central America I had maybe heard of, but I had never seen them on a departure board before, and I hadn't seen a lot of these Central American airlines. One last look at our airplane before it heads off to, if I'm not mistaken, I believe was Santa Cruz, Bolivia. In the meantime, we're going to head up to one of two of Copa's lounges, known as the Copa Club at Tocumen Airport. There's one in Terminal 1 and one in Terminal 2, so this one is in Terminal 2. It's newer and it's much nicer, in my opinion, as opposed to the other one. So all Copa business class passengers and Star Alliance Gold customers have access to this club. Now, this lounge pleasantly surprised me. Copa isn't necessarily known for being a upper scale, airline. However, this lounge would not let you know that. This lounge was built with everything you could need for a normal long-haul flight and things you would come to expect. Things like showers, things like private workspaces, quiet areas, places to rest. The ambiance was great, the views were fantastic, the food was exactly what you needed in this early morning. Really, this lounge was perfect and I couldn't really ask for anything more, especially between two 7.5-hour flights. It was a great break. The food in this lounge was about what you'd expect for a Central American lounge at breakfast time. It had fresh fruit, bagels, some Latin pastries, and stuff like that. Basically what you'd expect and plenty to tie you over for your next flight. I decided, however, to wait until the next lounge, which was right next to my departure gate, which may have been a mistake. We'll see when we get over there. Not that it was a bad lounge, but this one was definitely premier. And with this one last sweeping look here of Terminal 2 up from the Copa Club, we're going to head back over to Terminal 1, which is where our flight to Buenos Aires is going to be departing out of. As you can see here, there's not necessarily anything wrong with Terminal 1. It's just a little bit older and a little bit more cramped, just because that was the older style of terminal. It looks much more like an office building type setup than a big grand terminal. There's nothing special to look at, but it definitely serves its purpose, and like I said, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's just not amazing. They do have a food court upstairs of gate 134, 135 area, and this is open to everybody. The food looked great. I didn't actually eat anything there because I was saving my hunger for the lounge. However, the options looked fantastic, and so if you didn't have access to the lounge, I think you could find plenty of food options up here if you were in Terminal 1. And now right next to gate 30 here in Terminal 1, or 130 as they call it, is the Copa Club for Terminal 1. This is where I went into because it was closer to my departure gate, so I wouldn't have to run in case I ran long eating my breakfast. So let's head upstairs and see what this lounge has to offer. The lounge is pretty basic. I think at this point I was just spoiled because of the greenery that we found at the entrance to the last Copa Club, which I thought was just fantastic. Now the vibe of this lounge very much fits the vibe of Terminal 1 as a whole. It serves its purpose perfectly. I don't really have any complaints, but it's nothing to write home about. It's nothing memorable that's necessarily going to stick with me, but it was an excellent place to just kind of unwind from the flight, get some food, and hang out while I waited for boarding to start. One thing I will say is the best way to judge a lounge is by the views. Food is whatever, the vibes are whatever. What I really want in a good lounge is a great view of the ramp, and to be honest, this lounge did have better views than the other one considering it was right up against the window. The main runway in use was right in front of us, the main gates in use were right in front of us, and so there was plenty of action, plenty of airplanes to look at throughout the entire time. While I ate my breakfast, I had just some pastries, bagel, fresh fruit, and a nice Panamanian coffee. And on top of that was possibly the best lounge coffee I've had to date. The Panamanian coffee was fantastic. Over in the lounge, they also have a route map of their entire system, and from looking at this map, I didn't do the exact measurements, but San Francisco to Panama and San Francisco to Buenos Aires look to be the two longest flights, if not two of the longest flights. This was totally by chance. I just booked it to Buenos Aires because it was cheaper and I had never flown this airline before, but by luck, I ended up with two consecutive 7.5-hour flights. Now I wanted to use the restrooms over here before I headed back to the crowded terminal to get on my flight, and I could not find them. Turns out they're tucked over by where you check into the lounge along with a shower. I didn't actually have time to shower for this time, but I did use the restroom and check that out before heading off to my gate. Speaking of which, my gate was at the end of one of the wings of Terminal 1 here. A lot of the flights to South America were departing out of this side of Terminal 1, and so we headed down here to gate 126, and waited for our flight to board for Buenos Aires. Looking out of the ramp, I noticed something peculiar. When I booked this flight, both flights were on a 737 MAX 9, which was equipped with the lie-flat business class setup. This plane is not a MAX 9, this plane is just a 737-800. This was disappointing to me because the 737-800 just comes with the normal couch-style first-class seats or business class seats, which was plenty comfortable, but when I paid for this, I was really hoping to get that lie-flat seat so I could make a great video about that and get that full experience. So I did write to them to see if there was anything that we could do about that in the future so I could get a good video up about those, but in the meantime, we're going to just enjoy what was given to us. After all, business class is business class, and in the long run, I really don't have too many complaints. The seats here are about what you'd find on any domestic, narrow-body first class in the United States. I did find it interesting that we got the exact same pillow and blanket that they gave everyone in economy. Not that I need anything special, but usually they do elevate that slightly. And we did get a pre-departure beverage of either pear juice or water. I went with the pear juice because how often do you get offered pear juice? One of the strange things is that under the seat, because of the seat mechanisms and the power areas, there was actually no stowage under the right seats, or I guess the outside seats in the business class cabin. The inside seats had this small compartment that could fit like a purse, which the person next to me used, but there was no opening here. So anyway, I drank my pear juice and contemplated what I wanted to actually do with my bag, and you'll see later I ended up just kind of squishing it in there best I could, and the flight attendants really didn't have anything to say about it, so it just kind of stayed there. Looking at the pillow and blanket we were given, like I said, it was the exact same pillow and blanket I got in Economy Plus for my first flight, which worked. It wasn't anything special, but you know, it got the job done. But then after that, they actually came around with a tray and served us each a Ameneties kit, which these Ameneties kits were awesome. Everything in it was recycled and reused, including the packaging. So this is what came in it: some socks, an eye mask, dental kit, hand lotion, and some lip balm. Really, dental kit is key for me on these long flights. Being able to just go freshen up, brush my teeth, changes the game. So right about our time of departure, this fuel truck pulls up and the captain comes on board. Apparently, this plane never actually got refueled after arriving from its previous flight, and so we had to call the fuel truck back over to refuel us. So this was a huge delay, and we ended up actually pushing from the gate about an hour late because of this refueling issue. So it affected our ETA slightly, especially because I had a connection to make in Buenos Aires that became super tight, but that was a little bit Now, on the list of strange things you'll never find on a US airline, on our takeoff roll, the cockpit door popped open. And it just kind of stayed open. The flight attendants went over and closed it, but it actually was open a couple other times in the flight that I noticed. And the captain also would just hang out in the galley after using the restroom, talking to people and flight attendants and stuff like that. And when he would do that, sometimes he would just leave the cockpit door propped open, nothing blocking the aisle and stuff like that. Something that would give United flight attendants and pilots an aneurysm, but didn't seem to stress them out all that much. But it was definitely a weird thing to see, and it was a little uncomfortable, to be honest, just looking at that from my seat. Seat controls here are a little outdated. I have to wonder if they're going to be installing the lie flat seats across all their 737s and not just their Maxes. But you can see it is all adjustable here, and you just pull these tabs out to actually adjust the surface. We also had our hidden treats in the armrest. On the right armrest we had the tray table, which is pretty standard in this. And then in front of us there was no seatback TV, just because I guess it didn't work with the seats when they put these in Copa airplanes. However, in the other armrest was our TV that actually was on a mechanical arm that could be pulled up and out and propped up in front of us. I struggled to get it out a little bit initially because it just rotated in a lot of different ways, but eventually I finally got it set up, and it was just on this big long pole and it sits in front of you. Screens are definitely outdated, and the response to touch was not great. It took quite a bit of pressure, and because it was on this arm, the TV was kind of loose and it would kind of flop around a little bit. But it worked, it could use an update. Now, my whole life, one of my biggest questions about Copa Airlines is why does it look so darn much like United Airlines? And I did actually get an answer while I was on this flight. Essentially, back before Continental and United Airlines merged, Continental actually owned as high as, at one point, a 51% stake in Copa Airlines. And so Copa Airlines adopted the livery that was on Continental's airplane with a slight twist on it. Since then, after the merger and everything, the shares have dropped to basically zero. But Copa just hasn't gone through actually repainting the aircraft yet. But that is the reason, at least. Looking through the seatback TV here, the choices are pretty much the same from the first flight, but I really just wanted to show you kind of the responsiveness to touch on these older screens. Now, I didn't actually get a chance to go back and check out the economy cabin, so if you know what kind of entertainment options exist in the economy cabin of the normal 737 NG 800 model, then go ahead and throw it in the comments below, because all I can comment on is what I had here in my business class seat for this flight. The map feature was great. I always like a moving map throughout the flight. However, it was not interactive. It just kind of flipped through its presets, and that was basically all you had available to you. The other thing that was nice is that they actually had a picture-in-picture feature, so while you were watching something, you could search for something else or scroll through the TV, anything besides the map, and you could have that open in another window. Now, on the first flight, Wi-Fi was available, and according to the brochure in the seat back pocket, it should have been available on this flight too. I checked numerous times, however, and nothing actually showed up. Wasn't that bad. I actually was able to pass time with a couple movies, but I wasn't actually able to connect to Wi-Fi or have the option on this flight. With that, we finally had dinner approaching us. Now, I do want to mention, we took off about 2.5 hours ago, almost 3 hours ago. When we reached our cruise, it took about 2 hours for them to come around with our first round of food, which was just snacks and coffee while they prepared the actual meal, which took about 2 to 2.5 hours for us to actually get after departure. So I do want to mention that I did get a cup of coffee in the lounge, and I got a cup of coffee on the airplane, and the cups of coffee that I got from Copa were 2 of the best cups of coffee I've gotten on any airplane, in any lounge, period. So I don't know what Copa's doing with their coffee, but whatever they're doing, it is working. Our lunch on this flight came with flatbreads and hummus, came with our rice and carne, entree, and it also came with a small side salad. I stuck with my cup of coffee, and then they came around and offered everyone a glass of Coca-Cola, which I took to go with the rest of the meal. Now, another thing I do kind of want to mention is that the flight attendants on Copa Airlines don't speak great English, and on this second flight especially, which is somewhat normal considering it was going from Panama to Argentina, but even on the first flight there was a lot of the flight attendants struggled a little bit. So keep that in mind if you are flying here. If you have some Spanish speaking ability, that might come in handy on these flights. Lastly came honestly one of the best airplane desserts I've ever had, and this was a tres leches cake that they once again topped off our glass of Coca-Cola. This cake was absolutely fantastic, and it was a great thing to eat while we watched the sunset. Now there's a lot of clouds over South America as we kind of cut across going over to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and it made for some great sunset views with thunderstorms out in the distance and just some building clouds in the forefront. But we just kind of kept flying, the sun kept setting, and every time I looked outside there was a different but just as beautiful view. Now, something that I don't know if this actually exists on other airplanes and I just haven't noticed it, but in the restroom they do have a placard for if the door handle becomes inoperative, and it literally says to use a coin to undo the screw, pull the handle off, and how to break out of the bathroom if you get locked inside. Not a bad idea, but just keep that in mind. Unfortunately, about this time, the touch on my TV had completely stopped working. It didn't matter what I hit. I couldn't get anything to play. I couldn't use any of the buttons to get anything done, so I had to abandon the in-flight entertainment system altogether and just watch the sunset, which all in all wasn't too bad of a drawback. About this time, they came by with one final snack. They came by with a basket and choices of snacks. I went with these couple options here, as well as just a glass of water, and this time to prepare for landing. Sun was finally pretty much down on the way, and it got real dark, and then I came across these lines here. And I saw them on the ground. They were glowing. They almost looked like lava, but I couldn't necessarily prove whether they were or not. If you know what they are, please throw it down in the comments because I was extremely curious. Not that I desperately needed it, but it took me basically until now to find the universal power outlet just on the front of the section in between the seats. So keep that in mind if you do need an actual full-on plug. So heading off to customs here in Buenos Aires, and actually a lot of the South America airports seem to work in the same way. You'll see on my right side is the terminal open to all the passengers departing, and on the left side is the actual jet bridges that go out to the gates, and there's this weird in-between layer. Now, there's going to be a video coming up on my channel soon that actually uses these airports more, and you'll see how that works. But the in-between layer basically is where everyone funnels out to customs. So when you get out your airplane, you walk out your jet bridge, and the other doors are closed, so you're kind of forced through this pathway, and eventually it leads you all the way to immigration. And then for those that are boarding flights, they'll just open both the doors and you can walk directly through this and into the jet bridge. So kind of serves two purposes at one time. I did think about how easy it would be to theoretically sneak onto an airplane, not that anyone's necessarily doing that, but it was an interesting strategy as far as getting people to customs and boarding airplanes simultaneously. Now, I was transiting onto another flight rather than entering the country, so when I got to customs, rather than making a right and going to immigration, I made a left, and there was actually a transit path for other customers. As long as you don't have to recheck a bag, which I did not, I was able to head through that transit lounge. So off to our right, we can see the normal customs, and off to the left is for transit passengers, which there's just one stand, someone to make sure that you do have a reservation, and then you go through kind of a TSA type checkpoint and you're back into the airport and ready for your next flight. So stay tuned for those next flights. That video will be up soon. I hope you enjoyed this Copa Airlines flight. I definitely want to try it out in the lie flat seats at some point in the future. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you guys, and I will see you guys soon. Peace.